Here's an important topic. You've decided to follow this strange little internet man, who you're pretty sure is 3 boxes in a trench coat, into the wonderful world of drawing. But you're a busy little box yourself, and you don't have a lot of time to waste. What you want to know is this: how do I get the most out of Drawabox? Each lesson, speaking of lesson 1 onwards, consists of 2 main components. Lecture, where we go over concepts, explaining theory, and introducing you to some of the principles we're dealing with, and homework assignments. The homework assignments are specific. Do X pages of this exercise, Y pages of that exercise, and so on. Students will often come to Drawabox with, let's call it, baggage. Baggage from years of traditional school and classes that push the idea that if you're doing only what's assigned, you're not doing enough. I like to refer to these kinds of people as min-maxers, like those in MMOs who insist on figuring out the perfect build, the perfect progression, and the perfect stat distribution for their characters. Min-maxers refuse to take things at face value. They feel that the world is hiding secrets from them and that only those who push, who ask, and who insist get ahead. There may well be many things in this world that behave that way, but Drawabox is not one of them. Everything is laid out and available for free. There are no hidden tips and tricks, and if there were, they'd be freely available too. I'm saying this here because I cannot stress this enough. The best way to get the most out of Drawabox is by simply giving yourself lots of time to read, watch, and follow the instructions as closely as you can. When you sit down to work through a lesson, it's always going to start with some reading. You'll head over to the website, pop on over to the lesson you're at, and you'll read through the content that's there. Periodically, you'll come across some videos scattered throughout the material. When they come up, go ahead and give them a watch before continuing on to the next section of the reading. Do not try to only consume the material by jumping from video to video on YouTube. I know some of you will be tempted to do this, but you'll end up missing out on important information. For those of you who have a harder time with reading, and there are plenty of valid reasons for this, we actually just launched a new Drawabox audio player feature, which uses neural network-driven text-to-speech to read the material to you. We hope that it'll help those for whom large chunks of text is a deal breaker. We do, of course, recommend that you still try to follow along with the text as it's being read to you, so you can look at the diagrams and generally give yourself the best chance of absorbing the information. As you go through the written material, you'll encounter homework sections, where you'll find your assigned work. Some lessons, like Lesson 1, are broken up into multiple sections tackling different topics, and they'll each have their own homework sections, whereas later lessons have only one. Just as with watching the videos, you stop and work on the homework when it comes up. With the homework, your job is simple. Follow the instructions of each given exercise to the best of your current ability and understanding. Do not stray from those instructions, and do not attempt to complete more than what is assigned. Let's take a moment and look at what that really means. If you're assigned 2 pages, you complete 2 pages, and that's the work that you submit. Do not complete more, and do not do practice pages. These pages do not have to be perfect, or even good, so don't scratch out your mistakes. Your job is not to prove that you understand or that you can do the assigned task. Your job is to provide whoever's going to give you feedback a body of work upon which to base their understanding of where you are right now, so they can see what you do understand, what you don't understand, and what next steps would be best for you. Even if you did everything wrong, that goal would still be achieved. The one thing that is necessary is that you do not rush. Give yourself ample time to go through the instructions and to apply them. You must execute each form, shape, and mark to the best of your current ability, and when we get into Lesson 1, we'll go over some rather time-consuming processes that will help you achieve this. I know it's asking a lot. It's normal to be self-conscious, and as inaccurate as it is, it's normal to feel like this work is a representation of you as a person. Submitting work for feedback leaves us vulnerable to having our weaknesses called out, and it can often feel like we're presenting ourselves to receive a punch to the gut. I actually see this all the time in people submitting their work with lengthy self-critique, and it often comes down to the idea that if you point out the mistakes yourself, you are no longer the one being critiqued. Rather, you become an outside third party similar to the one giving the feedback, nodding along when they call out areas of weakness rather than feeling the sting of being on the receiving end. But that sting is important. The vulnerability means that you've opened yourself up, and you are as open to the feedback as possible. Anything you do to protect yourself will merely make the feedback less effective. It is far better to simply let your work speak for itself. And in all honesty, I instruct my teaching assistants to ignore it when students point out their own mistakes, as I don't want the critique the student receives to be contaminated. That brings us to the next point of how to get the most out of this course. Do not work in a vacuum and isolate yourself from others. As a beginner, you are not going to be equipped to identify what you do and don't understand from the material, what you're applying correctly and what you're not, and really what you should be spending your energy on. You'll do your best to follow the instructions, I hope, but having someone else review your work makes things far more straightforward. There are two main ways our students acquire feedback. There's the free community feedback, basically critique from other members of the community, which can be received on the Drawabox website platform, on our subreddit, and on our Discord chat server. Only the last of these options, the Discord server, is suitable for partial work, whereas you should have the entirety of a full lesson's homework completed prior to submitting to the subreddit or the Drawabox website. While community feedback is completely free, it does depend on the goodwill of other community members. This means that it's not guaranteed that you'll get responses, and that there is the possibility of getting feedback that isn't necessarily as accurate as it can be. In the future, we have plans for improving the reliability of community feedback and expanding what is available for our free students. But for now, you can check out the unofficial critique exchange program that one of our teaching assistants, Elodin, has set up on our Discord server. The other option, the paid official critique, is handled by a combination of myself and teaching assistants operating under my supervision. These critiques are in-depth and detailed, and while we do make use of pre-written chunks of text when we can, each critique is based on an analysis of your work. We use pre-written text where it's applicable, and write the rest as needed in order to be able to provide feedback as at low a price point as we can. Where community feedback has no real restrictions or rules, official critique is more strict in order to keep things efficient and effective, and so you'll have to adhere to the following rules. All students signing up for official critique must start at Lesson 1, and only move on when they've been given permission to do so. If you've completed Drawabox work in the past, you're going to be starting over. The lessons are designed to highlight certain issues and address them when it's most appropriate. Jumping in on a later lesson can make these issues harder to detect and resolve. So, you essentially have until the end of Lesson 1 to decide which route you'd like to take. Though there have, of course, been people who've used community feedback for a while before deciding to start over with official critique. You must work with the recommended tools. I'll go over what the tools are in a separate video, but at its core, it's that certain tools complement the course material very effectively, making it easier to internalize. This has nothing to do with trying to teach you how to use a specific medium, or to say that one medium is generally better than another. I myself am a digital artist, but I learned a ton from exploring my basics with traditional tools. Students are required to wait 2 weeks between submissions. If you submitted a lesson today and had it marked as complete, you would not be able to submit the next one until 14 days had passed. This is both to help students avoid rushing and to keep our staff from getting overwhelmed. This is not a deadline, and you should not interpret it as such. In fact, we pretty firmly try to discourage students from setting any deadlines for this course, regardless of their external goals. And lastly, submissions for official critique must be complete. For example, where lesson 1 has 3 sections, lines, ellipses, and boxes, you would need to submit all 3 together rather than one at a time. I understand that you may feel uncertain about the line section while going into the boxes, and may be worried about using techniques incorrectly. This is not really a problem, though if you insist on getting some feedback, you can have the very helpful folks on our Discord server take a look. In order to submit homework for official critique, students use credits. Credits are acquired by signing up to our Patreon, though we would like to offer alternative options in the future. The earlier lessons and challenges cost 1 credit, whereas the later ones cost more. You might be wondering, why complicate things with credits? Why not offer each critique for a set dollar amount? And that would be an entirely fair question. The fact of the matter is that this credit system, annoyingly complicated as it is, allows us to offer students feedback at a very low price point. While you might pay around $5 US to get feedback on your lesson 1 work, we pay almost double that to the teaching assistant critiquing your work, ensuring that you get reliable support for cheap, and our teaching assistants are compensated fairly for their time and skilled labor. We're able to do this without declaring bankruptcy because those credits expire if you haven't used them within 2 months, going towards subsidizing the overall price. Between this and some other avenues of revenue, Drawabox is able to focus on increasing access to information. This means that students who can afford to maintain a continuous pledge and allow their credits to expire do so, along with those students who purposely sign up at higher tiers to intentionally support the project more broadly. Whereas those who need tighter control over their budget can subscribe and unsubscribe as needed. Before we get back on track with the main topic of this video, there's one last thing I want to make very clear for anyone interested in signing up for official critique. Patreon charges you at the time of subscribing and on the first of each month until you cancel. So, if it's late into the current month and you're thinking about signing up, you may want to consider waiting until the first of the next month. If you do choose to sign up on the spot, you will get credits every time you're charged. But I want to make sure people only do that intentionally, as being double charged unexpectedly is never a pleasant experience. Of course, if that happens, you can always contact us for a refund. Getting back to it, when submitting homework for feedback in either route, whether community or official, you may be assigned revisions. This is not a bad thing, and it is certainly not a punishment. But again, thanks to traditional academics, we may interpret it that way. At the end of the day, all it means is that there are some areas where you misunderstood something important, and we want to make sure that it gets resolved before we send you forwards. In the official critiques, revisions are included in the original credit cost within reason. If it goes beyond what we'd consider reasonable, we may charge additional credits or ask for a full redo on a case-by-case basis. The latter usually only happens when students have rushed. Remember, critiques are a collaborative effort between student and instructor, and so look to the critiques as an opportunity to catch what you may have missed, but not as a replacement for your own effort in going through the material. So, how do we submit our homework? On Reddit, it's just a matter of posting your work. On Discord, you can hop onto the channel labeled for the lesson you're working on and post it there. But let's take a look at how to actually go about submitting your work on the Drawabox website. The easiest way is to go to the actual lesson itself that you're trying to submit and find the Submit Homework for Review button. It's here at the top. This will take you to the submission form with the lesson already selected for you, as you can see here. If you're submitting for official critique, make sure that this option here, Submit for Official Critique, is toggled on. It'll show a list of the requirements that we've already discussed and show which ones are met. If you want to submit to the community, however, you can leave it unchecked, which will also give you the option to automatically cross-post to Reddit, although this does require you to connect your Reddit account under the account settings page. Next, we come to this list of the homework assignments from the lesson. We can check off what we've completed. Ideally, we'd be checking everything off. If not, The submission will be considered partial, and while you can submit it that way, it's unlikely it'll be seen by others and it'll just go to your personal sketchbook. Down here, we can include a link to the homework itself. We don't host your images ourselves, so you'll have to use a third-party image host. We recommend Imager because it doesn't require you to create an account, allows you to post your work as an album, and while it has a tendency to put images out of order sometimes, it still makes life a lot easier for us when critiquing, since we can see all the images at a large size and jump around freely without having to click through an album. Note that when you're using Imager, you can just copy the URL for your album and paste it directly into the submission form. It'll generate a preview like this to demonstrate that it has worked. Of course, if for whatever reason Imager doesn't work for you, you can use any other image host as long as we don't have to download any files. Just keep in mind that if we can link to individual images easily, that's quite helpful. It's a lot harder to refer to specific drawings if the page they're on can't be linked to, so things like PDF files are definitely not ideal. And lastly, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them here. Just remember not to self-critique, not to self-deprecate, and be brief. You can, of course, just leave it blank. And that's it. Go ahead and click the submit button, and you're off to the races. If you've submitted for official critique, you'll get your feedback within a few days, so that's a good time to jump back into your 50% rule responsibilities. You'll be tempted to jump right into the next lesson or challenge, but remember, you may not until your submitted work is marked as complete. If you're submitting to the community, then ultimately you decide how long you want to wait. There's an important question to ask. Once you've had a lesson marked as complete, what does that really mean? Does it mean that we're done with these exercises forever? Unfortunately, no. What having a lesson marked as complete means is that you are demonstrating a decent understanding of the material that was covered, and that you appear to get what the goal for each exercise is meant to be and how to keep pushing towards it. It also means that you should take those exercises and add them to a pool of warm-up exercises. At the beginning of each sitting, you'll pick 2 or 3 of these exercises and practice them for 10 to 15 minutes in order to keep developing those skills and to keep them sharp. This doesn't mean that you're expected to complete a certain quantity of the given exercise in that time. Some exercises are quite complex and time-consuming, and so you'll likely either do a subsection of the larger exercise or spread it out across several separate warm-up sessions. Conversely, this also means that grinding away and doing more of an exercise than was assigned prior to getting your actual feedback is a complete waste of your time. As I've said before, put the time in to read, follow, and execute the instructions to the best of your current ability, and then submit your work. Keep in mind that when you spend time churning out twice as many pages, that's twice as much time you could have spent on doing what was assigned that much better. Do the best of your current ability. That is all we ever ask. Remember, above all else, what this course is focused on. The goal is not to have you leave as a fully developed master of draftsmanship. Our intent is for you to leave with a good grasp of how to approach learning, and to prove to yourself that you can learn, so that you can venture out into this big, wide world of resources and make the most of them without feeling lost. Before you go, if you're interested in other great and affordably priced learning resources, check out our sponsor, New Masters Academy. They've got thousands, literally thousands, of hours of video lectures from acclaimed instructors like Glenn Vilppu, Michael Matesi, Steve Houston, and a ton of others. If you sign up with the coupon Drawabox22, you'll get a full 35% off your first billing cycle. Even as Drawabox helps you level up on these useful tools and skills, there's no time like the present to dive into your real interests, so they can grow alongside your fundamental skills, developing you into a well-rounded artist. And of course, if Drawabox's approach doesn't end up being for you, it's only one path of many. NMA's got a ton of courses that dive deep into the fundamentals as well. You'll find a link to New Masters in the description below.